Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. My dad will be so grateful. See you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.
Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast, a show about crafting a life you love and making work optional using the tools of mindfulness, envisioning, and financial independence. I'm your host, Adam Quayle, and I'm so glad you're here. On today's episode, I'm joined again by my friend Jenny Wood, who joined us on episode 76 of the podcast a few weeks ago. Jenny is the founder of Google's Own Your Career program, which helps Google employees increase their impact and influence in their current role and or land their next role. In just a few months, the program scaled from 153 Googlers to tens of thousands of Googlers across Google's global offices, with 97% positive feedback. Jenny is also a Google executive leading a large operational team that helps drive tens of billions of dollars in revenue per year. Jenny loves improv, tap dancing, hiking, and flying airplanes as a private pilot. She lives in Boulder, Colorado with her husband and 2 children. Today, in part 2 of our conversation, Jenny shares her flip model for knowing when it's time to find a new role. And things get pretty personal for me when I admit to Jenny that I think I might actually fail her flip test. I really enjoyed this conversation with Jenny, and I learned so much that I'm already applying in my own career. This conversation has also made me think about my mindset about my career and how my career fits into my overall pursuit of financial independence. As always, you can find the full show notes for today's episode, including any books, links, or resources we mentioned in the episode at mindfulfire.org/77. Let's jump into today's episode. Jenny, welcome back to the Mindful Fire podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
So, Jenny, in our last conversation on episode 76, you shared why it's so important to let happiness guide your career. What comes up for me is, how do we actually know when it's time to switch roles?
Great questions. I actually have a little acronym on this one. How do you know when it's time to change roles, Adam? Or I like to say, how do you know when it's time to flip roles? Flip stands for F-L-I-P, fun, learning, impact, that's business impact, and personal. So am I having fun? Am I excited about the challenges we have? Am I showing up at each team meeting, raising my hand with new ideas? Or am I rolling my eyes when somebody comes off mute to speak, saying, oh, we tried that 4 quarters ago, it's never going to work, right? A little bit cynical. That's not fun. I know what fun feels like in my body, and that doesn't feel fun in that meeting. L, am I learning new things? And I don't just mean incremental learning, step function learning, like real big incremental steps in my learning. And by the way, I don't just mean learning about a product, learning about yourself too. So I just went through this experience. I just started a new role 10 days ago, and I had been in my old role for almost 3 years. And I thought I was still learning, but it was like real small learning day to day. It wasn't big learning. And when I think about the personal learning, I realize now that I'm in this new job, how much I am making massive learning leaps and bounds every day. One example is I used to struggle with decision making and being quick about decision making. And now I'm finding myself being much, much faster. And I realize in this new role is giving me an opportunity to be faster in that decision making. Who are we going to hire? Who are we going to pass on? How should I set up the structure of the team? These things are much faster now for me. And that used to be a real development area for me. So I realize I'm learning not just about new products and new systems and a new team. I'm learning about myself in this new role and how I've grown professionally in my ability to make decisions faster. So that was L, learning. I, impact, the business impact. I think I was making some business impact in my past role recently, but not nearly as much as I was making 2.5 years ago when I started on that team and had new goals that we defined and new processes and structures and built a new C-suite for our leadership team. Like that was real impact. And I think it had frankly tapered off if I'm being honest with myself. And then finally, the P stands for personal. What is going on in my personal life? And this can be 2 things. It can be, do I need to change cities because my fiance is in Ann Arbor and I'm in New York? And that happened to me at the time in a previous life at Google. Or personal could also mean, is this job so stressful that I'm staying up at night worried about it? Or am I so unhappy in this role that I am not even showing up for my friends? Or am I so overworked that I don't have time to go to dinner with my boyfriend? Whatever your case is in your own individual situation, all those things fall into personal. And that is okay to consider when you're thinking about, do you stay in a role or do you go? So again, that's how do you know when it's time to flip roles? FLIP, fun, learning, impact, personal.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful to remember in flipping roles. I feel I'll speak for personal experience here. I might fail the flip test in some ways. With my role, I've been doing it for about 6 years. We've gone through a gazillion reorgs. So there's been some new challenge, some new learning each time, but I don't know if the fun is there as it was in the beginning, the learning impact. It's incremental. But there's this other element of comfort. I guess it's comfort. I know it's always about stretching yourself and getting out of your comfort zone, but especially in the pandemic, it's been like, I got it good. I've got a good situation going right now. I have flexibility. I know what I'm doing. I can get my work done. I can parent full time and work full time. It's a challenge for sure, but I'm able to manage it. The thought of going and putting myself in a new environment, taking on new expectations and new products and challenges and everything stresses me out. So it's kept me, maybe I'm not thriving as much as I could in a different role, but I'm in a spot where I'm more than good enough for now. What do you counsel to someone in that situation?
Adam, I love what you're saying here. And there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who are going to be right in your boat, identify with what you're saying, especially during a pandemic. I'm comfortable. I've got a good thing going. I can balance somewhat reasonably, depending on the day, my job and my family and being a parent or being a partner or a friend. And first of all, I would say go easy on yourself, right? We are in an incredibly unprecedented time where we have enough on our plate just trying to eke by every day. So not every day is the day to be moving and shaking. I tend to be a little bit of a mover and a shaker. There's plenty of downsides to that as well. What you're talking about, I think, is the P of the personal, right? Like your personal situation right now with the pandemic, being a parent, having a small child who's not napping right now when your plan was for him to be napping during this podcast interview. That stuff is all legit and valid and needs honoring. And as we think about the mindful piece of your mission here, mindfulness is also being aware of what's right for you right now. So if this feels right, it's all about taking the pressure off of yourself to feel like I have to go after the next thing. I've been in this role for X amount of time. That's too long. Now, all this being said, because I do tend to encourage people to be the mover and the shaker and to go after the things that they want, I will just speak for a moment about rethinking the impossible. I'm going through all this too with the pandemic and two small kids, and I've got this side hustle just like you do. You know, yours is this podcast and mine is the Own Your Career program. We know these things can take plenty of time, personal time. And I thought, it's crazy, Jenny, to think about pursuing another role right now. This was my Q3, Q4 thinking. You have so much on your plate. There's no way you could possibly handle anything else. And I went through my own flipped framework. And for me, I realized that there were enough reasons that I should think about pursuing another role. But here's where I bring up rethink the impossible. It seemed impossible to have another role and to also run the Own Your Career program. But then I thought about a couple of things. I'm a hard worker. Let's say I work X number of hours a week. If I stay in my current role, I'm probably still going to work that same number of hours a week. I'm just going to replace it with different things I'm doing if I stay in my job or if I have a new job. Number two, we as humans, and I believe there's a social psychological principle about this, tend to think that an uncomfortable situation is going to be more difficult than it actually is, that the pain is going to be more intense, and that the duration of that pain is going to be more intense. So I was thinking, oh my gosh, if I take a new job, I'm building a whole new team. I had this, one job I was more strongly considering than the others. It's the one I happened to be in. And there was a ton of fear in that for me. It's all new stakeholders. It's all new teammates. It's all new processes. We have to figure out our strategy and write our goals and hire a ton of people. This all sounds exhausting and time consuming and scary and overwhelming. And what if I can't do it? What if I'm not good? What if they don't like me? All the imposter syndrome that just comes in with all that fear. But now I am in this job 10 days in, 9 days, if you don't count the Monday holiday we just had off. And by the minute I'm getting up to speed. And not only that, Adam, but I'm loving it. So I don't feel fully ramped up yet. But when I was fearing that the ramp up period was going to take 2 quarters, I'm realizing it's probably going to take more like 12 days. So I was thinking like really long, scary ramp up period. It's going to be months of pain, months of time away from my family. I'm 10 days in and it's actually feeling pretty great. I'm feeling really energized in ways that I wasn't even in my past comfortable role. And then in terms of the depth of the difficulty or the pain that I anticipated, it's been way easier and way more fun than I expected when I was in my fear-based place. So I'm not saying everybody is, fearful of their next role, but I think that we do have a lot of anxieties that come into thinking about the next job change and what happens next, because it's so much easier to stay where we are. And sometimes that comfort is appropriate given the pandemic, given where you are in life, parenting, etc. But other times it's good to push through that because the real growth happens on that edge of uncertainty, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of stress. And that's what really pushes you. Long term, we're all better for it when we take the leap and make that exciting change.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do agree with the fact that often the things we worry about are never as bad as we think they're going to be. And I can relate to a lot of what you said. So it's good to hear that pushing through that and getting into that new role, you're finding it exciting and exhilarating rather than stressful, overwhelming, right?
And just to clarify, I was really stressed and really overwhelmed because my side hustle is a big side hustle. That took up a lot of my time and energy in 2021. And I have a lot going on family-wise with having a 4-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old boy. I was really nervous and actually wondered if I was doing the right thing by my family and put a lot of thought into this. And I just have to say, I wish I could have those months back of that fear and stress and anxiety, because it's truly exciting and fun. And I don't think I'll be working any more hours than I was working in my old job. I'll just be working on different stuff and I'll be working differently. And it's a great opportunity, by the way, to reassess my priorities, to reassess how I work. I've just moved a bunch of weekly meetings to bi-weeklies. I've moved a bunch of 45-minute meetings to 30-minute meetings. I've thought about who I don't need to be meeting with regularly at all. I've thought about writing a sentence back to somebody versus a paragraph back to somebody. So these are all ways that I'm giving myself time back to free up time for more strategic work.
I also like what you said before, and you just highlighted again. You're going to be working a certain amount of hours. You're just going to be working on different things. And so I always have it in my head that it's going to be so much more time and so much more effort. And yeah. And I think I'll just voice something that I feel, and I know that some people that are pursuing financial independence often feel. It's like, I can just stick it out until I get to financial independence, until I get to that number that I have in my mind. So I want to just voice something that I think that I'm certainly thinking about, and I think a lot of people on the path to financial independence might be thinking about with regards to their career. What are the benefits, both personal and financial, of pursuing an opportunity outside of your comfort zone?
Oh, such a great question, Adam. They're pretty clear to me. The benefits financially of pursuing an opportunity outside of your comfort zone are the opportunity for more pay. You might be a certain level at Google or Amazon or a little startup of 15 people. And if you stay in that role, you might get a little more money each year. But if you move around, whether it's from one company to another, and then back to your original company, or whether it's just a new role you're pursuing at a higher level within your own company, that is going to be where you see the most financial gain. You're going to get maybe small increases. Maybe you'll get low single digit increase, depending on your company, if you stay in your current role. But if you pursue the next role, that's a bigger challenge for you, that is more responsibility, you're starting to see some real material gains in your salary each year, not to mention your stock opportunity, depending on the company, your bonus, etc. So from a financial standpoint, I think that staying where you are, staying put, it could actually be a headwind for making more money, for pursuing that path to financial independence. Now, of course, there's always the flip side, right? If you're at a company like Google or an Amazon or a Facebook, and you've got a bunch of stock options and you've got the golden handcuffs, and the thing you're considering that's out of your comfort zone is to go be a professional violinist, then we're talking something different where you've really got to weigh the financial trade-offs and your ROI of staying versus leaving. So I think that's a little bit of a different situation. Now, let's talk about the personal gains here, because you asked about that too. Now, these, I think, are hands down tremendous any way you slice it. There are always going to be personal gains to moving roles, to pursuing the next opportunity, whether it's internal in your company or external. In fact, even if it's a lateral move, maybe you stay at the same level, maybe you do something that others might perceive to be something that doesn't create any obvious career advancement, but it's simply a different job with the same pay at the same level, but you're doing different things. The benefit personally of this is massive for a couple reasons. One, your network. 2, your skills, and 3, your growth. So I think network is the most important one. So let's say you're working with the same group of 20 or so people day to day, right? That's your core working group, your team. And then your 100, people on your broader team in job A. You move from job A to job B, even if it's a lateral move. That core people you're working with of 20 are going to be totally different. That second level of tier of 100, 200 people you're going to be working with could be totally different. And that network is going to pay dividends the rest of your career, internally or externally. I firmly believe relationships are your capital. When you go to apply for your next job, trust me, your future manager who is doing the hiring very well, if they have your permission, ping your existing manager or people you work with and say, hey, how is it to work with Adam? Tell me about Adam. What are the strengths and what are the opportunity areas? You want to lean on as many people who will advocate for you as possible. And that's where doubling your network is something that happens naturally when you change roles. That was network. Number 2 is skills. You are going to improve your skills. Let's say you're a people manager and you've been a people manager for 2 years in your current job. You go on to your next job. In that first job, you were new to people management. And so you were cutting your teeth for 2 years. You were stumbling on things around difficult performance reviews or managing low performers or dealing with tricky HR issues or just how to have a great one-on-one with somebody, how to lead a good team meeting that makes your team want to come to it. You spent 2 years figuring out your skills there. And now you get to go to a new job and almost reinvent yourself or tweak up what you're doing and just make these small improvements on your skills. And there could be other things. You could be learning new products. You could be learning new systems, new processes. You could be in sales. Maybe you move to a role that's more operational. You could be in operations. You maybe move to a role that's more engineering. You learn SQL, you learn Python, whatever it is. Those are all developing new skills. And then finally, growth. When you have a new role and that's outside of your comfort zone, you're simply going to grow any way you slice it. You are going to discover yourself in new ways. You are going to be able to leave your old brand behind and take on a new personal brand. You're able to apply everything that you learned in the past. You're going to steal new Wi-Fi. What do I mean by stealing Wi-Fi? Well, you have the people in your life, in your career, who are your mentors, your boss or your coaches who you've designated as people who you want to coach you. Let's call those your internet providers. But you're also going to steal Wi-Fi, where you might observe a leader. So I think of somebody, Philip Schindler at Google, who leads a meeting that's open to 25,000 people in the Google business organization. And he does such an incredible job with high energy leading this meeting every couple of weeks. And one thing I've noticed that he does is every time someone asks a question on what we call a dory, which is our internal system of ranking questions, every time somebody has a question on there, he's so thoughtful before he answers. He says, thank you, Shanti. What a great question. Really appreciate you asking this. And it looks like we have 400 other upvotes on this question. So a lot of other Googlers are thinking about this too. What a beautiful way to honor somebody before you answer the question. If I'm in a new org and if Philip Schindler is now the VP or the president of my org, then I get to steal his Wi-Fi. He's way more senior than I am. He is never going to take time to meet with me and mentor me, but I can steal his Wi-Fi and I can learn things from him without him even knowing that I'm taking it. So when you're in a new role, you're going to have all these new opportunities for growth, AKA stealing Wi-Fi, in addition to the official mentors and coaches that you have. So to summarize, so many reasons why it's beneficial to change roles. You double your network, you increase your skills, and you experience a lot of personal growth, just to name a couple.
Yeah, I really like that a lot, especially the network piece. That is just a mathematical fact, but
Totally.
It's easy to overlook. The fact that you get a new job, you go to a new company, you have all new people. And I spent my whole career at Google basically so far, but some of the best friends I have and some of the most helpful people in my network are people I've met in different teams around Google. And so that is a good reason to consider it, if nothing else. But the other reasons are quite compelling as well. Let's talk a little bit about developing thought leadership, right? You and I both have these areas of interest and on-the-job side hustles. I'm quite impressed at how you've packaged your offerings and how you've distilled these ideas down into kind of talking points or takeaways that are very easy to grasp, right? Like the stealing Wi-Fi. I'm curious, how do you think about approaching building thought leadership in an area that you have interest in?
Absolutely, Adam. It sounds like what you're asking is, how do you build something great, right? We all have these ideas. How do you make your side hustle something that takes off, that sticks, that people want to use, that's helpful? And what are the steps to get there? So I'm going to throw another acronym at you, and I'm going to say, how do you pave the way for thought leadership? How do you pave the way for excellence? How do you pave the way for something great? Pave, P-A-V-E, standing for passion, ask, volunteers, and engage. So let me walk through these. First of all, so this is how I think we've made something pretty great out of Own Your Career at Google. Again, growing from 153 users in March, just 10 months later, we're now having 23,000 users with 97% positive feedback. I am really proud of it. I think it's pretty exciting. I think we have, paved the way for something great here. So here are the things I think about. P-A-V-E, passion, ask, volunteers, engage. This is successful, Adam, because I'm so freaking passionate about it. If this were about how to build garages out of wood and paint, it wouldn't have taken off for squat because I have no passion about that and I'm not that good at it. But I have a passion for this and I think I have a knack for it. And through all the coaching I had done a lot with underrepresented groups historically in tech at Google, a lot of coaching, a lot of people coming to me one-on-one for advice, I realized those were like my happiest 30-minute meetings of the week. So I realized I had this natural passion for it. And when you have this unbridled passion, amazing things happen. People ask me all the time, Jenny, how do you make time for this in addition to your very busy day job of leading a team? I say, honestly, I sit down at the keyboard and the content rolls out of my fingertips onto the keyboard like magic. Because I am so passionate about it, it truly doesn't feel like work. And so I end up putting a lot of time into it, sometimes on the weekends and in the evenings. It can be interruptive to my work-life balance, but I am passionate about it. Number 2, ask. I have asked for lots of help. I have asked for senior stakeholders to help. I have asked for people to give me their opinion. And some great things have come out of it. For example, I mentioned part of what this Own Your Career program is, these 4 PDFs, for example, of how to own your career. I initially had that all in one large deck, like a PowerPoint presentation. And I met with a wonderful peer of mine who I respect and admire so much, Molly Williams, also at Google. And I asked for help. I said, Molly, how can I make this better? And she's like, oh, too much for one deck. Just chunk these out into bite-sized pieces and have these be, independent standalone one-sheeters. And I was like, oh, what a great idea. So I asked a lot of people for help and asked a lot of stakeholders, a lot of senior people with influence at Google to give me their feedback, because that feedback makes the program better. It gets them engaged. It gives them a sense of ownership. They are weighing in to buy in. I love this concept. You've got to weigh in to buy in. So I'm asking people to weigh in so that they then buy in down the line if it's ever useful for their team. And that's ask. P-A-V-E. So we're on volunteers now. I could not do this myself. I got to the point where I realized I don't have all the skills. I don't have all the time. I don't have all the ideas. I have my limitations. I'm good at a couple things, but I'm really crappy at some other things. I need volunteers to help me make this great. So we put together 20% volunteers at Google, meaning they spend 20% of their time on this project. And then I leveraged our incredible network at Google. We have these big aliases, like tens of thousands of people called MISC aliases. It could be MISC New York, MISC Boulder, where I am, MISC San Francisco, and people write about anything. I'm selling tickets to the Knicks game. I've got a free car seat if someone wants to drive by my house and grab it. So I figure if people are posting about sporting tickets and free car seats, I can post about this, allow people to see that it's out there, and then also ask them to help. So we had a logo competition for the Own Your Career logo, and we had 40 submissions and we had 1,300 people vote. And we've got this nifty little airplane logo that I love so much, created by someone named Patrick in the Sydney office. And asking for these volunteers has made the program so much more than what it could have been on my own. And then finally, engage. I have not been shy to market it. I use those same MISC aliases. I use our big Women At alias. I know that this is a good program that I'm really proud of, that people tell me is fantastic and helpful and useful. People have called it magical and career changing. Like, those are big things people are saying. So I'm trusting that. And instead of feeling nervous and saying, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, I'm so glad it's helping a couple people, but it'll never be that big of a thing. No, it's a huge thing. I'm incredibly proud of it. And so I am trusting this feedback and not listening to the gremlins in my head and my heart that tell me that this will never be big. I'll never be able to do it. It'll never be more than a small thing. I'm listening to the data that is out there versus the story I could be telling myself to naysay myself. And because of that positive feedback, I am shouting from the rooftops on all channels, video channels and LinkedIn, and writing Entrepreneur Magazine articles. and using these aliases at Google to market it and to engage people because people are asking for this. The final thing I'll mention on engagement is we have put a lot of intention around making it look polished. I think that marketing matters. I think that look and feel matters. We have an incredible designer named Marta Caetani out of Italy, who it just has such unbelievable gift for design and simplicity. And if I put together a one-sheeter with a bunch of tips, it would look like a clunky black and white document that is off kilter and off center and doesn't use spacing well. And she just makes it shine. So people like the simplicity, people like the consistent branding, people like the format and the layout and how practical it is, how bite-sized and useful it is. So I put a lot of focus on the content to make sure that it's practical, tactical, actionable. It's not theoretical. It's literally something you can apply that afternoon, like write in bullets, not prose, or meet with your manager's manager twice a year versus never, which 42% of people do based on a LinkedIn poll I did with hundreds of responses. Or think about your 3 superpowers before you go into an interview, right? These are all things that I think about content-wise that make it practical and tactical and actionable. But then we also have this really nice layout, look and feel and design excellence that makes it very attractive to people and makes them want to keep coming back for more tips. So to summarize, what has made this such successful thought leadership and made this really grow very quickly at Google? How did we pave the way for this? Through PAVE, passion, asking stakeholders for help, volunteers, and engaging through our wide aliases, and then also really nice content and marketing and design. That was a lot on that one, Adam, but I'm pretty passionate about it.
Yes, you are. That is clear. And I love that it comes through and that it's really energizing you to put in the extra work to do this. I really like this PAVE acronym for paving the way to build thought leadership. But I have a lot of things I'm doing that I'm trying to figure out how to pull them together. So within Google, I have mindfulness sessions, meditations that I'm leading. I have courses that I'm offering, some of which I've created, some of which I haven't. And then really, as I think about the podcast, the whole purpose of the podcast is to help people live a life they love through mindfulness, envisioning, and financial independence. Those are essentially the tools. And so how do I pull these together to pave the way to thought leadership in this area in a way that I'm not doing two different things? I'm just building thought leadership internally and externally as you're doing with Own Your Career. Any tips for me to pull this together into kind of a cohesive message or area that I want to build thought leadership in?
Yeah, it's a great question because what it sounds like is you have these disparate pieces, these widgets. You've got the podcast, you've got the meditations you lead, you've got the envisioning, and you want to have this be more of an overall brand for yourself or something that's more user-friendly where it feels like one thing as opposed to 3 different things or 5 different things. The first thing that came to mind is calling it something as an umbrella. So maybe it's cohesive living, or maybe it's Adam's, I don't know, you're testing my creativity on the spot here, but Adam's approach or whatever it is. And then you have these things under it, these 3 things under it. So I think, first of all, it's just up to you to literally do what you're saying. How do I do it? And literally just pull them together under some other name. And then once you have that, I recommend 2 things. Someone said, oh, Jenny, you should have a website. And I was like, oh, that sounds like way too hard. And I don't have the skills and I don't know what to do. It's not that official. We did create a little microsite. I asked somebody to volunteer to do it. We had some people apply. It's amazing the resources that Googlers are willing to offer you. And we did pull it together under this microsite. And then having that microsite, or basically the Own Your Career home site, allowed us to really think about what we stood for and what our brand was and what our design was and our logo and our tagline, which is be bold, be curious, be you. And I think you could do that pretty easily, Adam, and without a ton of effort. And you could probably get someone at Google to volunteer to do it for you. And then second, this goes back to the engage piece of PAVE, P-A-V-E, which is spread the word, share the gospel, market it, right? Send it to a couple lists at Google. And instead of thinking, oh, nobody wants to hear about this, the gremlins, remind yourself that you're doing something pretty incredible and that there are a lot of people who could benefit from it. Myself included, I just wrote down weekly guided meditations. I used to be really diligent about meditation, and I would do it every day for at least 15 minutes. And man, have I fallen off the wagon, and I need it right now. And I just put 15-minute meditation daily on my calendar this morning to try to get back in the rhythm of it in this new job. So I'm reminding you that people really want what you have to offer, Adam, and that we just need reminders. Marketing what you're doing to people doesn't mean you're spamming them. It means that you're making your useful content, your useful ideas, your useful leadership accessible to people at a time when they may need it. And people need it at different times. So even if you've sent it out to a certain Google alias once 6 months ago, there might be a lot of new people now in the new year or in new roles who now need it, who didn't before. And so having some kind of consistent messaging around it and not just messaging once, I think is quite useful. The other thing I'll say here, because this reminds me of it, I think the best quote I have heard in the last year. A couple of days ago, I was listening to a podcast called Free Time by Jenny Blake. And this quote is, "You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your system." Oh my gosh, that is so powerful for me right now, because I'm in this new job where I have lots of goals and aspirations and creating our targets and our key results for this new team. We're hiring an entirely new team. So I have the goals, but I have really poor systems in place to make myself successful right now. So those systems could be, how do I screen candidates in a way that are principle-based and doesn't make me take 20 minutes on every resume, but I simply say the system is, if they have this, they're in. If they don't have this, they won't get an interview. What are the systems of my calendar? Am I just going to ask people to set up time willy-nilly, or do I set up a system of clear office hours with 20-minute increments so it reduces the amount of time I have to spend in back and forth about how to get people on my calendar? Do I have a system of meditation? And this is what reminded me of it. No, that had fallen off the radar. And I kept thinking, I'll just use a Headspace meditation app whenever I get around to it. But that was a system that meant I was never doing it. That was a non-system. So I now have a system, again, just today, but 15-minute meditations on Monday through Friday at 1:30. So we'll see if it works, but at least I have attempted a system so that I can rise to the level of my goals rather than falling to the level of my systems.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to pull it together in one brand and one offering. Jenny, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been really awesome to get to know you, to hear about your work. And I took away a ton of tips that I'm going to put in my own life as I continue to navigate my career.
The pleasure is mine, Adam. Thank you so much for inviting me. You're doing great work. These are things that people think about every day. Financial independence. I love that you have a passion for that. Mindfulness. It is just, I think, at the root of happiness for all humankind. And I'm really, truly grateful and honored to be part of the conversation today, because you're doing things that are so important. So thank you for your time and your great questions. And thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me on today's episode of the Mindful Fire podcast. I hope you my conversation with Jenny Wood, the founder of Google's Own Your Career program. As Jenny mentioned, you can connect with her on LinkedIn to learn more about the work she's done, the tips she shared, and receive any of the new career tips that she sends out. If you enjoyed today's episode, I invite you to please hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this. This just lets the platforms know you're getting value from the episodes and you want to be here when I produce additional content. As a reminder, you can find the full show notes for today's episode at mindfulfire.org/77. If you're looking to craft a life you love and make work optional, I invite you to go to mindfulfire.org/start to get a free journaling guide with the first 3 questions I recommend you ask yourself. To find out what the questions are and get the free guide, go to mindfulfire.org/start. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.